Welcome everyone to this episode and of the podcast. And today we're going to talk about self-actualization, which is how you can be your best self, and then self-transcendence, which is about how you can transcend your ego so being in the world without, minding only your own interests. And what tools can we use? Can we use insights from our own self-conscious, and how do we reach that knowledge? So today we have with us Dawe, which has been studying these topics. Dawa, can you tell us how can we become better people through self-actualization and self-transcendence?
Yeah, that's a that's a pretty big question, obviously. But no, I really like the work of Ken Wilber because I think he has he has a really good book about radical wholeness where he talks about things like growing up, showing up, waking up. And the waking up is about, I would say, self-transcendence. So it's kind of surpassing the ego state and becoming one with cosmos, all that is, God, unity consciousness, how he calls it. But there's also, how do you call it, self to improve yourself, and that's more like self-actualization. So that's more growing up psychologically. How do you treat other people? How do you treat yourself? And I think in Buddhism they have this with the three pearls of wisdom, like how can you cultivate compassion, how can you cultivate wisdom, how can you cultivate skillful means. And in one way you can use almost anything to do both of those things. But obviously there are some more people that have thought about it more, or that have worked towards it in specific both text but also methods to do this. So I would say both Hinduism and Buddhism are very focused on doing both, really, to kind of learn more about yourself, learn to regulate yourself, learn to kind of see that you're not your emotions, you're not your body, you're not your thoughts. So you are the awareness in which all these things arise. And then by doing that, you, in a sense, become calmer, kinder, hopefully more wise. And then ultimately, there is this insight that you are not the avatar only. You're also something in which the avatar arises, how to say it. And yeah, so there's different things there. And yeah, I don't know what your experiences are. Like sometimes, I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about it, but certain ceremonies can also help with getting people beyond this kind of self level and connect you with something, a broader intelligence. So I think Ken Wilber calls this transpersonal bands. So things like reincarnation, self-regression, psychedelics, sometimes breath work can actually take people out of their current identification of this current body and connect people to at least the information from other incarnations.
From what you're saying, I understand that from the Buddhist tradition and the Hinduist tradition, we have like, what can I say, tools like yoga, meditation, and but then from the indigenous cultures, we also have not psychedelics, but the sort of mushrooms or types of substances that can take us out of our ego and into our subconscious. Like there are some deep messages in our subconscious that we maybe are not open to seeing when we're in our normal state. Um, and breath work you mentioned, and I'm sure that the viewers also have experiences and suggestions on other tools to take yourself to this other state where you see more clearly what is important in life. But we could go into how you use these tools. But then another topic is how do you make these insights stick? Because from my observation, you can have this enlightenment. You're seeing things, you're loving people, you're seeing what's important in life. You can see your own flaws even, which is what is most hard because like we all like for myself and I see from other people also we all always want to help everyone else, but to change our own patterns, that's more like harder. It's like smelling your own breath is what's hard. We just want to help others. We don't want to really change ourselves. I don't know if you want to um, expand on how can we make these insights stick? Are there tools to make these insights stick, or do you have some advice on how we can make these insights stick so we don't like have these bursts of wisdom and then the next day we're yelling at the husband or the wife again because
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think it's here. It can be very specific, like what technique, but I also think just consistency and doing a lot of practice really works. So I was following this 45 Days to Awakening course from Jeffrey Martin, and I really liked his approach. It's a scientific kind of approach to kind of the classical waking up, enlightenment, cessation, however you like to call it. And what he basically did is he was quite, in the traditional world, he was quite successful. I think he was quite young when he became both very rich and, he did everything that life kind of tells us should make us happy, and it didn't. Like even some things that a lot of us will strive for our whole lives, like, oh, when we finally have the material wealth or when we finally have the fame, then I'll be happy. And he had to a degree some of this. And then he said, well, if the things that I'm told by mainstream society, I'm doing it well and I'm still not kind of happy, then can't I just study who are the happiest people in the world and what has made them happy? And what he found is that generally the people that were considered to be the happiest in like overall were the people who had had an enlightenment experience. So who had kind of transcended the ego. And what he did then is make a study of these people. And this was like across different cultures and across different religions. And some people had been, practicing monks for 40 years and had been teaching. And in their practice and in their teaching, they had reached enlightenment very gradually. Some other people were just like a house mom from the US who kind of just flipped into it, how to say it. And what he then started to do was interview these people and see, because he wanted to make it scientific. So he wanted to see how they experience the world. So, how do their senses work? How do their thoughts work? How do they experience the world? How does their thinking work? And then using kind of these investigations, and he interviewed these people for quite a bit, he had some really interesting results. And what he then also did is he started asking, what did you do to get here? And some people did nothing. They just had a kind of spontaneous awakening, but a lot of people had done stuff like meditation or what we said earlier, breath work or inquiry. And what he basically does in his course is that he introduces people uh, every week to a technique that has been proven to work the best for the most people. So he basically introduces people in the period of the course to 14 different techniques that have worked for a large scale of people and that are in a way the most effective techniques. And he has collected them from very ancient traditions like Advaita, Buddhism, Mahamudra, to relatively new techniques like glimpsing from Loch Kelly or the Headless Way from, I forget his name, I think Richard something. And he just exposes people all, and he also does like psychological testing before and after, so you can actually prove it quite a bit. And he says that he has quite a good success rate, and yeah, I really like that. So if people are curious, into this, you could definitely check out his work because he describes quite well what he's doing, and he has built a very interesting protocol to at least introduce people to the different methods.
Yeah, but then I want to ask you about because then I want to ask you about spiritual ego because how is there's a lot of traps when you try to you try to work towards your own enlightenment. There are several traps you can fall into. One is sort of the spiritual ego, where maybe you can fool yourself into one, you can fool yourself into like striving for enlightenment, which is again being in your ego. And the second one is like starting to think you're better than everyone else. Now you have a problem with your family and all your friends, and that's because you are enlightened and they aren't, you know? So how can
Well,
you
that is a real problem. No,
so how can
no,
you know whether you know it's the if you are a difficult person and actually not enlightened at all, or if it's like you are enlightened and then you're not on the same frequency as the people surrounding you. You know what I mean? Like they are not
maybe yeah, no, it depends obviously a little bit. I think Ramda said it very well. Like if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
that's so true.
And I think that's very, I think with Christmas coming up, we can all agree with that. But it's also because family triggers a lot of these very core programming. Because I think when we're from 0 to 8, our brain works on our emotional brain mostly. Only after our 8th year, our neocortex comes online and we can start use the rational stuff. So all our emotional stuff and all our childhood trauma gets re-stimulated by our family, which we spend the first 8 years of our lives. So it makes sense that that can kind of uh, trigger it. But yeah, it's hard to say. Like and more skillful, and skillful means the application of wisdom and compassion. So, and if you can do that, then you could say that you are making progress, right? And also, what Jeffrey Martin says is that this enlightenment is not necessarily an endpoint, but more a scale of things. So they call it fundamental well-being, and they have put it in 4 different locations. And so fundamental well-being can show up in 4 different ways where people kind of the first time connect to fundamental well-being. And you can have some glimpses before as well.
You
And
might need to give us some
yeah, how do
example
you
and
know that?
it's something the internet is struggling a little bit, so you might need to exemplify and repeat some of the things that you said. But I just want to ask one question because some people are very empathetic, like we call them empaths. They are very oriented to other people's needs. They are genuinely happy if they can help you and see that you're happy. So, but as suppose as to themselves, they don't really uh, care so much about their own needs, or maybe they don't even know what their needs are. And so I have been thinking, are these people the enlightened people or not? Because they're so other people oriented. And like they're more like more. Where's their ego? You know, the ego just disappeared. So are these people the enlightened ones? But then on the other hand, these people tend to um, get into relationship with really narcissistic people that hurt them. So that's why I'm like struggling to like understand where to place these people because on the one hand they're not able to defend themselves or set boundaries. On the other hand, they're really unselfish. Like it
Yeah,
seems
I
like their
think
ego went, doesn't exist or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of things here, and what's maybe the best thing to start is what is the definition of enlightenment, or as Jeffrey Martin calls it, fundamental well-being. So his definition is like our animal brain is kind of always wired to detect a danger, and we're always focused on that. So we're always focused on maintaining our physical body, and we're mostly in some level of fear to do that, because this is how it works on an animalistic level. It is to keep the physical system alive, and generally to be in some level of fear helps with that because it makes you aware of your surroundings, and aware of where you are in the social hierarchy, so you have access to resources, mating opportunities, etc. um, and he says basically people need to kind of transcend that, and he says if people check in and they ask themselves, am I fundamentally okay? So is there a feeling of okayness in my system under any circumstance? So also if maybe something terrible just happened, a big setback, then he says you can be in fundamental well-being. And I think what you're describing is more people that it might be a kind of character. Some people are just kind of kinder and more empathic than others. Some people are more selfish than others. It could also be training from childhood, like some people, as a survival strategy, are very focused on others because if they weren't, they wouldn't be safe. So kind of focus on the well-being of other people to feel safety within themselves. So it becomes more a survival strategy, but that can, if it's to be safe, it is actually a thing that comes from the ego, but on a different level, because safety is the most important need. And if we were growing up in an environment where our normal feelings and needs weren't met, and we had to take care of the feelings and needs of our parents, then often people become people pleasers because they get trained to do that. Because if they didn't do that, their own environment would be more chaotic and more unsafe.
So
So I
what you're saying is
think,
that if you're really uh, if you're just sacrificing for everyone else all the time, it's not necessarily that you're enlightened. It might be that you are a people pleaser. But then the way of checking with yourself if you're the Buddha or if you're a people pleaser is that you feel happy and fulfilled within yourself. Is that the what you can, how can you know?
yeah, well, it's kind of funny, and probably a lot of people won't like this, but the whole idea of enlightenment is so vague. So it's a bit the same as God. Like everybody has their own definitions and ideas for it. And this is why Jeffrey Martin wanted to quantify it on some level. So he wanted to put it in a scientific process that is measurable. And obviously, you can have a lot of ideas and concepts against that. But I actually think it's a very interesting idea to try to do that. And I think he actually succeeded very well in doing that. So I think people, what would be best is to kind of dive into that. And maybe he has a test where people can actually test how they experience the world. And what he found is that people in different locations of fundamental well-being experience the world differently. They experience it differently, how they sense the world, how they think about the world, how the world appears to them. For example, some questions like, do you feel that there's a you and an outside world? How do you hear sounds? How do you feel towards yourself and others? A lot of these things are kind of quantifiable on that spectrum of fundamental well-being. While the other thing I think is more even though it might be nice that people, and I think this is more evolution. Like nature simply tries out different strategies at all the time. Like if we were all very egoistic, that wouldn't work very well, probably, because we would never kind of be able to have bigger groups because everybody is so selfish. There would be a lot of aggression, and that would probably hold the population down. because people would always be fighting with each other. So if you have some people that are more aggressive, not
Okay.
this is also with evolution, it's not that there's one successful path. So there's a lot of ways to survive as a human being and to pass on your genes to the next generation. And all those paths are working to a degree, and all those paths get conserved for the next thing. And this is where I like biology. It's not that there is a one size fits all strategy for these things. I don't know if this answers your questions, but otherwise, let me know.
Yes, from what you said, I am. Is it like if you feel a general sense of well-being and peace in when you're more closer to enlightenment? Because some people are struggling, and they say that being feeling down and maybe not being able to talk to the people that you used to as well as stuff, that's sort of an indicator that you're moving you're changing towards maybe a better self. So this seems to contradict each other.
What do you mean? Or could you put it in a question?
Yes, if I struggle, I'm in a dark hole. I feel alone. I don't feel that I can connect as well with my friends and my family anymore. Is that a sign that I'm very far from enlightenment, or is it a sign that I'm transitioning to something better? Because if you watch some of these videos, it's like, okay, this is just a sign that you are becoming, that you're changing, that you're going through some difficult stuff, and you'll start in the other end, you'll be more and more enlightened person.
Yeah, I think it is a super interesting question because this is something I've been, and this is also has a bit to do with the self-actualization and the self-transcendence. Because I always look at the self-actualization as we need to accept that we're human beings. Let's say that we're like we are at least coming partly from social group animals. Like if you look at the bonobos and the chimps, our closest families, and then being having been hunter-gatherers, growing up in small tribes of people, think up to what is it, Dunbar's number 140 or something. There is a codification within our physical system and our mind that has taught our ancestors, if you this is how you have survived as a species. So, and this is where these 12 needs also come from. We want to be accepted, we want to have belonging, we want to have meaning in a group. And if those needs are met, we actually get the release of certain neurochemicals that make us feel good, right? So I would say this is more building a healthy, positive ego. And then you could say the self-transcendence, and this is sometimes what you see in Buddhism, is to kind of let that all fall away and you become more the awareness in which the whole play starts to appear. But for me personally, I think it's healthy to kind of cultivate both, but I'm not sure if that if like classic Buddhist people uh would be with that. And yeah, how do you know if you're more enlightened? I would say um the more you kind of identify with the awareness behind your emotions, behind your thoughts, behind what's happening in the physical body, instead of being identified with it and then being triggered by it, that could be a sign of the more enlightened you are. So the less disturbed you are by what's happening outside impacting you on the inside. So the more equanimity or the more calm you can preserve, the more um how do you say it, the more uh, ability to respond you have, that might be a sign of enlightenment, I think. But
So
again,
what
these
you're
are very
So what you're
difficult
saying is
questions.
that if like the people around me are constantly yelling at me, I still keep my calm, and I'm not triggered by that, and that would be a sign of enlightenment then.
Yeah, you could say that. But on the other hand, if people are continuously yelling around you, you could also say that that might be a sign that either the group you're a part of is in danger, or maybe your position within that group is in danger. Because why is everybody yelling? Is there danger? Is there a social struggle going on within the hierarchy of the family? And those are kind of the social games. Like if we and those are connected with a lot of neurochemicals as well and stress hormones. So it would also be weird, I would say, and almost unnatural if there is crisis and you would ignore the warning systems that your body would give you because of, thousands of years of evolution and teaching you, kind of rewarding you for survival, that is helping you survive, and punishing you for things that happen that aren't good for your survival. But to be honest, I haven't really found the ultimate solution there personally yet. But you could also say maybe it's much more enlightened to set a healthy boundary
Yes, because
where
we're not
you,
going to be like Jesus. We're not going to go on the cross for to save other people and self-sacrifice. Then, the answer is more self-love, to set boundaries, because we are as much as valuable, because we're part of the one. So you're saying that maybe it's more enlightened to withdraw or set boundaries and say no, to learn how to say no. Because if not, again, we're back to the people pleasing question. So if I'm just
yeah,
doing,
it's
and maybe you're not helping other people with emotional problems if you just accept their behavior. I don't know. What's your thought on that?
No, it's kind of interesting. I did a lot of kind of Byron Katie, where you can look at thoughts and how thoughts impact your own behavior, but also your feelings. And in that sense, what I liked, like in a sense, you could say that Jesus was enlightened, right? Because he shows unconditional love. Like the people around him are trying or are killing him, and he is still like, I'm fine with that. I don't let anger towards these people dominate my system. So he still stays in unconditional love. And I think there are similar stories from Tibet when some of the monks that when China invaded Tibet, there was a lot of kind of, panic, and some of the monks were arrested and were put in prison and were treated pretty horribly. But these monks, they just kept being so kind and friendly despite all the abuse of the Chinese prison guards. And then somebody asked them, like why how can you keep being kind to a person that is abusing you? And then I think the monk said something like, well, just because these people have forgot who they truly are doesn't mean that I have to. So these monks still understood that we're still one thing. And just because an aspect of that one thing believes itself to be something different and it's damaging other part of that thing, that doesn't mean that I need to do that. So also these monks, despite being abused, could keep that frequency of unconditional love going. So so there's something to say for that. And they do say also that in enlightenment it could be that there are tests, like when can you keep that frequency of unconditional love despite things going very badly. Like Byron Katie goes to quite some extremes with this, where she says, like, unless you can be in peace when somebody is throwing your child in the fire, you're you're not enlightened. And obviously for most normal people that sounds like insanity. And also from our survival point of view, that sounds like insanity. Like if somebody is directly threatening the most important thing for your survival, one of your children, and kind of ending that life, obviously, you're gonna feel very bad about that. So yeah, I don't know how this works out exactly. And but theoretically, if you can keep that frequency of unconditional love for yourself or everybody else, no matter what they do to you, I think that is a very powerful state to be. And I think you could call that enlightened. But what I also kind of think sometimes in the West, and maybe because we have Jesus as that example, it also becomes very extreme. Like, how about you be enlightened and live a nice and kind life and be of service to others? Like, it, why would it need to be so extreme where a person needs to die or where some person needs to go through something very heavy? And this is a bit different with a fundamental well-being. Like fundamental well-being can be present also if you lead a very normal life. And this is also interesting, I think, that he says, like, sometimes, and this is a bit because of how enlightened people are presented to us, they're always quite extreme people that have become enlightened that then become the symbols for this idea, like Jesus or like Buddha or like monks that sit in a cave. But if you look at, I think it's called the pillars of Zen. They describe, I think, 10 or 20 people that become enlightened in the classical sense of Zen Buddhism that are very normal householders. So these people have children, they have jobs, and the meanwhile, through their practice, they become enlightened as well, and then it's much less extreme. So enlightenment in that idea is available for all people, and it's a bit. I would say it's almost a bit like a sport. I don't know if I maybe Alan Watts said this as well. Like enlightenment is a happy accident, but you can make yourself accident prone. Like you can actually do stuff to improve your chances of becoming enlightened, which is things like meditation, which is things like inquiry, or those 14 different methods that Jeffrey Martin talks about in his course.
I think
I don't,
Osho also said something similar, that you can't really actually uh, practice yourself into enlightenment because it just happens. But then he doesn't advise against having a spiritual practice because it opens the possibility of this enlightenment happening maybe. Uh, but then it's very easy to get into this striving towards enlightenment and uh, doing things against yourself that is really hard just because you want to get there. And then in the end, they sort of learn that you didn't have to do any of these things. It was,
yeah, yeah, but it becomes very paradoxical here because, and this is where I kind of like Jeffrey Martin because he says, yeah, well, also like what is enlightenment? It's basically enlightenment is the realization that this idea we have of this idea of I am here, the I is just a thought, right? So, and enlightenment basically is understanding that that whole I, that thought, often held together with all kinds of emotions and fear. So it's this knot. But if you untie that knot, that I is seen as not being your true identity. And your true identity is this spacious awareness that is available everywhere, but that's being transceived through a physical body that you have identified with because you have been trained to your whole life and you experience its sensations, its thoughts, its feelings. And once people understand that, you could even say like, who is getting enlightened? Because but here is like you get this whole cluster of paradoxes that kind of come together. And this is why they call it the gateless gate or the pathless path, because once you're once the insight is there, like the path was always there. You were always walking on it. But here is also where language becomes a huge problem because if you call it enlightenment or the non-dual state, it means that it's not two, so there are no separations. But we, as a human being, always experience separations, if only that we believe that we are the body. So there's a body and an external world of that body. And we experience that because of the senses, but those senses are there to keep this organism alive. Because if we wouldn't have those senses, we would bump into all the walls and we wouldn't take care of feeding it and drinking water and stuff. So also for simply the survival of the body, you actually need an ego. You need a kind of an operating system that identifies with it and that takes care of its needs. So it's kind of interesting, but there's a lot of kind of paradoxes that start to unfold here.
Yeah, that's interesting because it connects to the 12 needs. So you sort of have to have the ego to satisfy the 12 needs. So you have to put on your mask first so that you can, get this 12 needs and then you can help others. Is it maybe that's how you can see it?
Yeah, and also Maslow, like again, you can discuss about it, but he puts like self-personalization and self-transcendence are the top two levels of his pyramid. So if you are hungry or you don't have a roof over your head or your the neighboring tribe is attacking your tribe, you're not, you have other needs to take care of first because otherwise your family, your tribe, or maybe your physical body might not survive. And as long as you're identified with that, you want to kind of defend that because this is the biological imperative, right? This is how evolution has always done it. So only once most of those other needs are met is there the room and the space to look and to start to reflect on these things. So you could say it's kind of a luxury thing to be able to, or not necessarily luxury, but yeah, it's like it's not so normal. And I think in the Vedas they also say like people that want to become enlightened, you need to have certain prerequisites. So they basically say you need to be a bit tired of life to begin with. Like most of life needs to feel a bit boring to you. Like it needs to start to feel a little bit like you've done everything because they say if you still feel that there's a lot of things you would like to do in the world, go do them. Have the experiences of that life instead of trying to become enlightened because they say it's really no use to try to become enlightened if there's still a lot of things in the world that feel really appealing to you.
Wow, that's
Uh,
interesting. Um,
yeah,
so I still have things in life that I want to experience. So I guess I'm not enlightened anymore. But there's still I can be sensing that state of awe and being outside of myself. So I'm sort of
yeah,
confused. I just want to have one more question because from my biology, I think I'm a little bit the kind of person that is very like in my own bubble. It's not that easy for me to get out of the bu bubble and see that someone else is struggling because then I just have to be more mindful of what's going on outside of the bubble. And then when I compare to people that are very empathetic, they're not. You have examples of people that do not take care of themselves, but they take care of others. Um, so my question was, how can we understand enlightenment in that? Is none of us enlightened then, because these people are not taking care of themselves, not setting boundaries, not being looking out for their own psychology, their own bodies. They don't eat healthy, but they're very preoccupied with everyone else, maybe, um, but then some of them can be a little bit toxic sometimes too because they are
yeah,
like sometimes they're like, oh my God, nobody cares about me, and then they become toxic, at least in time, because they don't set boundaries and people don't cannot set boundaries for them because they can't see when what needs you have when you don't even know yourself. And then as for me, in my bubble, I have to how can I approach the enlightened state more? And I have to get out of my bubble. You see, these are two different struggles, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
very different paths to enlightenment, because we have like one the if you're very empathetic and you don't mind your own health and well-being, but you're very caring about others. And it also sometimes comes with this needy vibe, this energy of I need your approval, or I need something from you, which is sort of repulsive sometimes. It's something that you don't like this vibe. I'm not sure if I'm analyzing this correctly or not, but
No,
as for
well,
me, my vibe is perhaps that this person doesn't care about my struggles. She doesn't even see that I'm having a hard time, and if I am having a hard time, she doesn't really know how to handle it. She's like not knowing how to listen to my struggles. So maybe I don't care to talk to her about it. I don't know. Do
yeah,
you have some reflections of these very different types of um,
yeah. I think I can give an answer to this and see if that vibes or not. Like, what I would do now is for people first to check if they have complex trauma or not. And that's something you can test with, like Tim Fletcher has on his website, like 87 characteristics of complex trauma. And what you could also do is check your attachment style from youth. So if you have an unsafe or insecure attachment style, that's a guarantee that there's complex trauma. And otherwise, simply have a look at the website of complex trauma. And if it appears that you have complex trauma, and a lot of people have, because yeah, it kind of comes with the territory. I mean, all of our grandparents or parents here in Europe lived through a war. So they say for a war to kind of get out of the system, you require at least 7 generations of people that have not been in a war. So I think most of us have complex trauma, and it's good to be aware of that. Now, I would say work on the complex trauma first. Then, in addition, learn and train yourself to meet your own 12 needs and to take care of the 12 needs of other people. Because what you say, like if I only care about your 12 needs and not about my own, then I break down and you need to start taking care of me sooner or later, because otherwise the whole system implodes. So it's actually much healthier if, especially if you're a grown adult, that people can take care of their own 12 needs to the greatest, as well as they can, and then ask for help when they need it. But it's much healthier to do it in that way than these other strategies. Now, I would say if you notice that you've worked through most of your complex trauma, you know how to take care of your 12 needs, and you have a sort of stable foundation in life, and you're interested in enlightenment, then I would definitely look into it. Like, enlightenment is a lot like any other subject. You have people that have looked into it for, 50 years and have experience with it for that period of time. And you can read their books, you can find them on YouTube, you can hear about their techniques, and treat it like anything else, any other interest. Like, if you want to become a good cook, you start to do cooking classes, you start to read cooking books, you watch YouTube tutorials on how to become a better cook. For enlightenment, it's exactly the same. Like, you simply start doing that, but I would do that from this position of where you have worked through or are dealing with your complex trauma and you know how to fulfill your 12 needs. Because yeah, I think in the sense Maslov is right. It's healthier to work on a healthy and good ego first and then transcend it. And this is actually something they found in the course also of 45 Days to Awakening. So what happens if people kind of awaken, some people call it, what basically happens is that there's a shift within the system where people before believe that they are the emotions or the mind stream that plays in often in the back of their head, this continuous creating and creating of problems and trying to find solutions that creates this endless mind stream. And people often say that mind streams kind of being generated in the back of our head. And most people identify mistakenly that that's who they are. Uh, and then often with thoughts, you have a lot of emotions attached to that as well. So we often think that we are this mental, emotional, um, how do you call it, mix of things that we can sense in the body. However, if you become aware that you're not that and you're actually the awareness in which that arises, what can happen is that if you don't have a healthy ego yet, so you don't know how to take care of yourself, you have a lot of unprocessed trauma in the system, what happens is when that shift happens, then all the unprocessed emotions can come up. All the trauma from childhood that hasn't been processed can come up. And what can happen then is that people can have a so-called dark night of the soul because of this enlightenment. And in the course, they actually needed to take actions against that because people would have this awakening experience, but then feel super bad for a while after because all these unprocessed emotions that before they had been able to suppress with their thoughts and their kind of mechanisms of our mental emotional system, but because that kind of fell away, now all this negative emotion, or it's basically trauma emotion that has never been processed. So it's guilt, shame, fear, grief that has never been processed suddenly floods to the surface and can be completely overwhelming and very unpleasant. So this is why I would say, yeah, work on a healthy ego first and then try to transcend it. I hope that answers your question.
I think that was a very useful answer. I think it answered some of the things that we discussed previously also about weren't you supposed to feel like amazing when you're enlightened and then you feel like shit? That's maybe because you're sort of going through some trauma that you have experienced. As for me, I maybe also, just recognize that we all have trauma. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's maybe like most people have. You just have to identify your shadow. What is my shadow? What is my problem? As for me, like we have talked about in previous episodes, I have a family where my grandfather sat in a prison camp in Poland during the Second World War, and there was a lot of yelling and in the family, and then all the children became very aggressive and stressed. And this is what we also are. Like you have to acknowledge that okay, I'm stressed, I'm aggressive, so that's what I've been trying to work through. And that's my trigger. And when I'm with my family, which is like similar to me, they're all like talking over each other, nobody's listening, everyone's yelling, then you don't you get a good communication, and maybe it's hurting the relationship in the family, which is what I see also from my cousins, and that these really aggressive people is damaging their own relationships to other people. And as a person, but I still have one question because
Yeah.
I would say from what you're saying, I'm a person that can take care of myself, and I feel generally happy. But then my problem is seeing other people's needs because I'm in this bubble of yeah, I have friends. I'm happy with my life. I have some things that I miss, of course. Everything is not perfect, but then my main problem is, seeing when other people struggle, just actually noticing, and then being the listener instead of because when people have problems, I generally get what this is for, especially for people very close to me. I don't want them to have problems. So I don't want to see that they have problems. I don't want to listen to it. I just want to give them a lot of advice how to like self-improve so that I don't have to see their pain because it hurts me, especially when they're close to me. It hurts me more even than if I were struggling. So I don't want to see it. I just want to be in my happy bubble. Can you give me some advice?
Yeah, I think, well, what could help there is just look at your own emotions. It could be that there's just a lot of suppression there of maybe, yeah, there could be a lot of suppression of emotions and maybe seeing them in a certain emotional state triggers a fear in you because you have kind of pushed away or kind of put that emotion in the shadow yourself, or maybe you were punished when you were a kid when you were showing that emotion. So you have learned to ignore it or neglect it. And then if somebody shows that emotion, it could be that it triggers something, an inner child aspect in yourself that feels very uncomfortable with it. And just like you push it away in yourself, you want to push it away in other people as well. So I would kind of look into your emotions there.
Well, I think that's very true. And I don't really know how to look into those emotions in myself, because what I notice is that when people are struggling and maybe I'm not a, I don't have sort of the skills to be there with them and feel their feelings because it's too hurtful in a way. And I see that people that are more empathetic, more not even taking care of themselves, they're a lot better at being in the pain with other people. Whereas me, I don't want to be in that pain. I don't want to feel it.
No, and that's something then you could practice or learn. And yeah, I can
How?
like
Tell me
well,
how.
well, I could send you some materials from Tim Fletcher because he says a lot of people of us have, especially if you grew up in an aggressive family, probably the moment when you showed vulnerability that was either ignored or punished. So you were taught that me showing sadness or me showing fear isn't getting my needs met. Actually, it's the opposite, because if I show vulnerability, I get punished. Or so what you learn then as a child, you learn to stuff your emotions. So you learn to ignore those emotions because you adapt to what gets your needs met in the system where you grow up.
Actually,
So
actually, I
if
don't just want to um,
yep.
tell you what I think is the case is that it's not that I was met with aggression, but I was met with this sort of needy love that I couldn't, that I wanted to push away because it asks too much of me.
Yeah, it could very well be that your parents were not able to meet their own emotions either, so they wouldn't be regulated themselves. So, in a healthy situation, what is the case is that people are emotionally well regulated, so they don't have repressed emotions from before, and especially if they're not in danger now. And then, if a child would have an emotion, it would you would be like anger, for example, is somebody is crossing my boundary. Sadness can be that you don't know how to solve something, and it's kind of a call for help. And so all of our negative emotions actually have evolutionary benefits, and we can look those up. Like what are emotions supposed to do? Why did they evolve from our ancestors? Like what evolutionary function did they have, and do they still have? But if we haven't learned that, or if we learn that, oh, when I cry, somebody's making fun of me, then you learn to not do that anymore because you want to survive in the group.
But
And
I'm
if you,
confused because it's not, I don't recognize that as my problem because um, I feel that, and I feel that I was, my caregivers were very open to my, but it was too much. It was too, and there's this needy vibe around it too. That feels like control. It's like
yeah,
it feels like okay, I'm swallowing you. I'm just you and me are just one. And if I wouldn't let that happen because I felt that on some subconscious level, it I felt like it hurt me, and I think that's correct because I think when people that struggle, but they are still good empaths, like they want to help you, they drag you down into their own personal trauma if you get too close in the way that they decide.
yeah, there's a lot of things here and a lot of words. So what you describe now, I think they call that emotional enmeshment. And actually, if you had parents that became emotionally enmeshed with you, it's actually a sign that they weren't very well regulated. So, so you understand, like a
They're
healthy
making you
parent,
depend. They're making you dependent instead of helping you.
yeah. No, like in a healthy situation, what would happen if you have a parent that is well emotionally regulated, and as a child, you meet the world, you get overwhelmed by something in the world, so you need a safe place. So you go back to your parents hold you, they ground you so you can regulate. Because as a child, your brain isn't able to do regulation completely by itself. It doesn't learn that till you're like 12 or something. And as a child, if a parent then can be a safe haven for the child, so the child can regulate, then feel safe again. I've touched my safe harbor, and then it wants to go out in the world, and a parent should let them. So a parent should let them. And this is called the circle of security. So a child goes out into the world, gets overwhelmed by something in the system, needs safety, goes back to the home nest. The parents are there, provide safe and stable room for the kid. The kid gets regulated, and then the kid starts to explore again and learn something new. And this cycle of going out into the world, exploring, getting overwhelmed, returning to the parents, feeling safe, regulating, going out again, that's kind of healthy regulation. But if you had parents that when you came there, they couldn't help you, or they had parents that were helping you but then didn't let you go out into the world, or were kind of swallowing you when you were coming to them because they had some kind of needs, then all of that is in a sense unhealthy regulation. And
Yeah, yes, I
if
think that the
you
last thing that you describe is what I felt I had to push away because I feel like that's like dragging me into the unhealthy psychology that
yeah,
the person had, you know? And I think that
yeah,
was just
if they were not regulated and they try to drag you into that,
they're
and
making
it
you
can feel like
dependent.
love. Yeah,
Yeah, they're making
exactly,
you
and that's
dependent,
not
and it's
healthy.
some loyalty connected to this. You're giving away you have to be loyal no matter what, and you become them, which is super unhealthy when they don't have a balanced psychology.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think
And
that's what I'm struggling with because I kept my distances. But now because of my biology also, I think, I mean, there's something in my biology that puts me into this bubble where I'm super interested in what I am interested in. Maybe I should have a diagnosis or something.
yeah,
Someone told me once, I wouldn't be surprised if you had some letters.
yeah, no.
Too interested in
So
your own stuff and like not unable to talk about, what kind of color the curtains have. Or that's just too boring.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, and I think like neurodiversity is a real thing, and I have a bit the same. But if you feel that you're getting swallowed up by your, or if you have that feeling, then I would definitely look into enmeshment a bit. There's actually quite a bit there, and there's also things you can do to deal with that. And what that can also mean is that for you, it was actually unsafe to connect with a parent. So then you actually couldn't regulate your own emotions when you were overwhelmed because your parents would swallow you up. So you had to regulate yourself somehow instead of somebody could help you with regulation. So you probably never really learned to regulate yourself, or you didn't learn to co-regulate with a parent. So then it's very difficult if you never learned that to provide it to your children. So if now a child comes to you, basically the child only needs you to be aligned, let it know that it's safe and okay, and it will go out into the world again. But you probably get something in you gets triggered by their emotion, and that puts you out of your emotional balance, and that's why you want to keep it away. That would be my guess.
Yes, maybe I
But
get
if you,
afraid of connecting because I'm afraid that someone will drag me down into their dark hole if I do that. Uh,
exactly.
yeah.
And that I would say that's an indication that there's some unprocessed emotion in your own system, but that you have been successful at ignoring so far, which is fine. I mean, these are all survival strategies.
Yeah. And now we have moved towards like more psychology. Uh, but maybe I will have to deal with those emotions to reach enlightenment, would you say?
Yeah, yeah, all your whole emotional, like like everything from 0 to 8, all that stuff that when we get overwhelmed and we don't learn to regulate well, that basically becomes an overwhelm in our system and that gets stored in our kind of limbic system. And this is what we would call our triggers. And those triggers will come up. You will need to work through your whole emotional system. And that includes all the fears of going crazy, fears of dying, fears of being alone, fears of being abandoned. So you're gonna probably work through all emotions because as long as you haven't, there's still hooks there. And that's what makes enlightenment or the way up there both interesting, but it can be a very unpleasant experience. But on the other hand, you're carrying all those emotions with you in your subconscious now anyway. So it's better to face them and process them than to just let them sit there and be unaware of them.
Okay, so I have homework then.
We
Do you
all
want
have homework. Yes.
do you want to say some last words before we end this episode about enlightenment? I mean, I think I've had a lot of good advice
No,
that I
well,
can
maybe
apply, but yeah, if you just want to have some last words too.
yeah, maybe I can we can put some links up in the comments or in the description where I can link through the 45 days to awakening and also to the complex trauma because I think um I did quite a bit in the last, I would say 15, maybe even 20 years. And I think it worked well. But if I would go back 20 years ago, I would have changed the order quite a bit. And I think if you do this stuff in the right order, it will actually help you a lot with it will become more efficient. So I think if we put like two or three links in the description, then I think that should work for people.
That's so useful. And people can do a lot of work themselves without going to talk therapy. And we didn't go into all these other tools that you can use also, but maybe that could be for another episode. So thank you for
Yeah,
watching us, and we're very interested in comments and reflections on what you think about this content. Thank you.